Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with Gonçalo Valverde. Hi, Gonçalo. Welcome back.
Welcome, and thank you for welcoming me back, Vasco.
Absolutely. So, Gonçalo, on Tuesdays, we talk about teams. But before we dive into that, we want to know, of course, what was the book that most influenced you in your career as a Scrum Master?
I'm going to say two books, although I could be talking about two others or three or more. But the two ones that come to mind was one of them, Difficult Conversations. This was even before I was a Scrum Master. It was when I was more a project manager, because this book made me realize that we can actually have difficult conversation in a constructive manner. I must admit that for some time I was bit confrontational when we had difficult conversations and didn't even understand the idea. And that book made me reframe the way I addressed people and the way I addressed these kind of topics, with first coming from their side, then explaining my side and trying to reach an agreement. So that will be one. The second one would be User Story Mapping by Jeff Patton. Probably a lot of people reference that one, and I will also, not because only of the technique, because I love really user story mapping. It's a great visualization technique. And also about all of the rest that he puts in the book. He tells the story of user stories, but not intended here. And it made me realize quite a lot of things which are important about user stories. For example, I love this example of the great user stories like a family photo picture, like the idea about the conversations, the emphasis in the conversation. I already knew that, and in that book bring me more insights to that part. Also the part of the project versus product. So I love that book, and it changed me a lot of things in the way I thought about Scrum and product management.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And with difficult conversations, one of the things that I usually like to emphasize is that it is the job of the Scrum Master to build and be part of many different conversations. And of course, because of that, also many difficult conversations where perhaps the goals are the same, but the solutions are different. And then we have a conflict on the solution rather than focusing on the goal, right? And I think that one of the things that difficult conversations brings up is this idea that you need to first agree on what the intention is before you can figure out how to get there, right? And I think that's also a critical tool to have in our toolbox as Scrum Masters.
Yes, and I also enjoyed the idea of it's a situation problem, not a personal problem. So you should address a situation, not the person itself.
And those are indeed great references for us as Scrum Masters. User Story Mapping, of course, by Jeff Patton, a key tool to have in our toolbox, by the way, if you don't know. I have a link that I'll put on the show notes about a workshop/facilitation guide for Scrum Masters wanting to facilitate their first User Story Mapping workshop. I'll put the link on the show notes. So if you're interested, check it out. And of course, read the book first. That's important. Gonçalo, that was great. Now we turn our attention to teams and how sometimes they become their own worst enemies. So tell us a story of a team, build the context for us. Tell us a little bit more about what kind of organization, how big the team was, maybe the project, but then walk us through the steps, the slow evolution of that anti-pattern that ultimately led to problems in that team.
Okay, so not so many time ago, I was working in two teams actually. But they were actually more of one team, and they were working in a project which we'll call it more brownfield than greenfield. So it was a migration of something that existed, being done still in COBOL and very old. It's something new. And in that team, there was one person that was a bit disruptive. So when I joined the teams, that person was already put on hold by the product owner, which was a bit of a project manager, and he was put even in test management in their own part. And it was a kind of person that in the beginning there was some conflict, so it was decided to isolate him. And the more and more people were talking with him, the more they wanted to put him away. And the more he was being put away, the more he was frustrated and being aggressive with others. So this thing started to be worse and worse, to the point that the team didn't even want to do tests. So this example is not really created by the team itself, but the way the team started dealing with that was also not so great, because once new elements came to the team, because we had some people joining the team, after one week, 2 weeks, they were already hating the guy without even interacting that much with him. So it was more a question of not interaction with him, but hearing what the other guys were saying about this person itself. So it was a really tough situation, and I really couldn't find a way to solve this, because the person itself, I tried to coach him by myself. I tried to understand what was his challenges, and it was to the point that I understood, okay, in the end, it's the team that matters. As much I don't like to break up people and take them from the teams. And then I decided to talk with management to say, okay, this person could be great in another team. In what is right now here is going to destroy the team. Not because of his being a bad person, but the way people are looking at him, this is not working at all. So it was a difficult conversation. Unfortunately, in the end, the management decided not to take that person out of the team.
I can only imagine what happened next.
Well, what happened next is that, I'm no longer in that project, no, not the internal organization. What happened next is that he was reinstated into the team again. So instead of being separate in a keyway team-ish that he was reinstated in the team. But then again, nobody wanted to work with that person, and they started neglecting that kind of work with them. In the end, things managed to sort down by themselves because that project was cancelled. So the dream was broken.
I would say that that's kind of understandable, since they are hiring new people, but they are not taking care of the team. There's a latent conflict going on, but they don't want to solve it. It's almost as if the project wasn't important, right? It's almost as if they didn't want the team to succeed. They just wanted the team to work on something.
A bit, yes. It was a question of, okay, we need to deliver things. Actually, to be honest, I even challenged that probably shouldn't be working with Scrum in that kind of migration. Probably Kanban will be better, because in Scrum, well, we don't need forcefully to have user stories, but user stories tend to help. In that, it was more a migration, and we couldn't even talk with other people. So, okay, if you want that, then probably using Kanban and breaking these tasks, and that's it. Nevertheless, it was also the idea that the project we just do the migration, which in the end it's not true, because if you do migrate one thing as is to a new thing, guess what happens when the things that were not working in the old thing not work in the new thing? The problem is of the new thing. So you need to reinvent. It's not only a migration.
Yeah, absolutely. Scope is something we discover as we start working on it.
Exactly.
Even if it were a pure migration, we would discover things that we would need to improve, change, performance-wise, maybe, usability-wise, whatever that would be, right? But the thing that kind of struck me was this understanding that from management, that the way the team worked, the way the team worked and how they worked wasn't relevant, right? It's okay if they're in a conflict. It's fine. Let them handle it, right? And that kind of puts me in this mind that, or allows me or pushes me to think that when management, whoever that is, could be a team lead or a CEO, it doesn't matter who it is, but when management doesn't think and doesn't act as if the way the team works together is important, then most likely what will happen is that the team's conflicts will escalate, the team's dysfunctions will escalate, and potentially, like in this case, the projects get cancelled. Because if the way a team works isn't important, if how effective they are isn't important, if how happy and productive they are isn't important, then probably what they are working on isn't important either.
Yes, and to the point that one thing that I believe that is essential in any project, besides other things, is testing. And putting this person in, let's call it Siberia, handling testing, just burned the idea of testing and user testing and like continuous testing for all the team. So then we had developers didn't want, we just do unit tests and that's it. So it was destructive in a whole. Even the team was trying to avoid doing anything related with testing, which in the end, okay, you do something, and if you don't test it, how do you know it's really done? So it put also this kind of challenge, not only the question of conflict with the other person, but the team not wanting even to think about real testing. Okay, unit testing is important. In the end, if you don't do integration testing and end-to-end testing, then you don't know if you're really done or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great story that gives us quite a lot of hints that we can use to look at our teams and how leadership acts towards the teams to understand whether the work is really that important. Thank you for sharing that, Gonçalo.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.